Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. You know, it's funny, but you probably interact with poetry every single day without even realizing it. I mean, think about it. From the rhythm of your favorite playlist to those catchy jingles that pop up on your morning feed, poetry is literally everywhere. So today, we're going to decode the actual mechanics behind literary expression. We're taking it from this mysterious, intimidating puzzle and breaking it down into clear, completely understandable building blocks. Whether you're a longtime literature fan or someone who usually avoids poetry like the plague, this structured journey is going to completely change how you read and appreciate the written word.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the power of poetry, then cover the core elements, the three main types, the author's true purpose, and finally, how it all connects to the audience.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the power of poetry, beyond the page.
Let's go ahead and shake off those dusty stereotypes about poetry being just, old words trapped in heavy textbooks. I want you to think about this for a second. Why do we perform specific, deeply emotional rituals? Like, why do we light candles, burn incense, or write these incredibly heartfelt poems for our heroes and modern-day patriots? Paint a picture in your mind of that profound silence that happens right after a massive tragedy, or on the flip side, a monumental human triumph. In those defining moments, our standard everyday vocabulary completely fails us. Just saying I'm sad or I'm happy doesn't even come close to carrying the immense weight of the human experience. We reach for poetry because we're desperately searching for a way to articulate the inarticulate.
And that is exactly how we universally express love, honor, and patriotism. Just think about why we use things like candles to elevate an occasion. We use physical items to transform a normal space into a sacred one, right? Well, poetry is exactly that, just in linguistic form. It's the ultimate tool we use to elevate our communication. We naturally crave heightened language to match our heightened emotions. When we celebrate a hero, we don't just read them a dry, chronological list of things they did. We craft a living, breathing form of expression dedicated to honoring them. It's an act of deep reverence.
Moving right along to Section 2, core elements of poetry, the building blocks. Let's consider the concept of point of view. When we read a poem, we almost always assume the author is the one talking directly to us, kind of like we're reading their personal diary. But actually, that's not always true. The point of view tells us exactly who is speaking within the constructed world of the poem. Is it a historical figure? A fictional character? Pinpointing this profoundly influences how we understand the flow and the ultimate message of the text. Imagine reading a poem about a historic battle. Think about how drastically the entire tone and meaning changes if the poem is written from the point of view of the victorious king versus the point of view of a defeated, grieving soldier in the trenches. That one single shift in perspective changes the entire emotional reality of the piece.
So, the secret is that every single poem relies on 5 core elements as its ultimate decoder ring. We just talked about point of view, right? Well, then there is the purpose. This is the underlying invisible engine that actually drives the author to pick up their pen in the first place. What exactly do they want you to feel? Then we have poetry form, which dictates the genre and the structural rules they've chosen to play by. Delivery is all about how the poem is meant to be consumed by the audience. And finally, length. And length isn't just about word count. It really dictates the immersion level. If you manipulate just one of these variables, you change the entire experience. If you take a poem designed to be a quiet, written reflection and suddenly change its delivery to be shouted out loud in a crowded stadium, it transforms completely. These 5 blocks are how the magic is actually constructed.
Now, let's apply this to something incredibly familiar. And honestly, this is where it gets really fascinating. Even modern music, like the APL song by the Black Eyed Peas, perfectly utilizes these exact same elements. We usually separate classic poetry from our Spotify playlists, but they use the exact same underlying mechanics. If we evaluate this song, we see a clear point of view, the singer, who is addressing a very specific audience of fellow Filipinos. It uses a rhythmic, musical delivery combined with stanzas to express deep cultural pride, and it's a specific length designed to be powerfully digested in just a few minutes. Guys, that is poetry in action. It totally bridges the gap between ancient texts and modern radio.
Okay, let's head into Section 3. 3 types of poetry, the power of 3.
We can take those building blocks we just learned and categorize almost all poetry into the power of 3. First up, we have lyric poetry. This uses a personal, first-person point of view purely for self-expression and raw emotion. Think of it like a solitary voice confessing a secret, like, "My heart aches for the summer sun." Second, we have dramatic poetry, where the author entirely steps back and speaks through the interaction of characters. It's kind of like listening in on a heated argument between 2 lovers on a stage. And finally, narrative poetry. This is where a narrator literally takes you by the hand to tell a grand, complete story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like, listen, children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. By checking these features against any text, you can instantly decode the framework the poet is using.
Notice the stark contrast here when we look at length, and consider why form always follows function. Why can't a narrative poem be just 2 lines long? Well, because world building, establishing character arcs, and unfolding a complex plot simply take time. Narrative and dramatic poems are elaborate. They require a slow burn to pull you into their reality. On the flip side, lyric poems are usually short and simple. They're designed to deliver a really quick, direct emotional hit. If a lyric poem drags on for 50 pages, that intense, concentrated burst of feeling gets entirely diluted. The length is entirely dictated by the emotional job the poem is hired to do.
And all of this ties directly into how these poems are delivered. It's pretty incredible to think about, but long before written text or printing presses were even a thing, humanity used poetry as our primary technology for sharing history and traditions across generations. Epic narrative poems like Homer's Odyssey were memorized and chanted aloud for hours, way before they were ever written down in ink. In a way, poetry is essentially human software that predates the hardware of paper and books. Depending on the type of poem, it was shared through spoken, chanted, or sung deliveries, often paired with a musical instrument like a lyre, which, fun fact, is actually where we get the word lyric. Poetry is always fluidly adapted to the technology of its time.
Which brings us to Section 4, the author's true purpose. Why write?
Now that we know the types of poetry and how they're built, we have to ask the most important question of all. What is the overarching intent behind the words? Notice how the concept of purpose sits at the dead center of absolutely everything an author does. It's the invisible engine driving all of the creator's choices. The purpose defines the very type of poetry they choose to write, the delivery method they prefer, and the exact, precise words they pluck from the dictionary. Everything starts right here.
Whenever an author sits down to write, they usually set out to accomplish one of 3 main goals. First, they might want to persuade you. Think of fiery political anthems or desperate romantic pleas. The goal is to shift your worldview or convince you to take action. Second, they might want to inform you. This could be passing down factual history, explaining a deep philosophical truth, or just teaching how something in nature works. Or third, they simply want to entertain you. They want to share a wildly compelling story, amuse you with clever wordplay, or just make you laugh out loud. The tools remain the same, but the target they're aiming for is completely different.
So, I really want you to make this an interactive habit. The next time you encounter a new text, whether you're reading a classic sonnet for school or just listening to a rap song on their commute, physically keep this question in the back of your mind. What is the author actively trying to do to my brain right now? Are they trying to shift my perspective? Are they dropping knowledge? Or are they just trying to give me a good time? Taking a quick second to answer this instantly unlocks the deepest, truest meaning behind the rhythm.
Finally, Section 5, connecting to the audience, finding the right style. Let's connect all of this back to you, the audience, and look at how creators deliberately tailor their work to find the perfect style. Think about the wide world of entertainment and sports. Just as singers like Sarah Geronimo excel in pop, while Gluck 9 dominates in rap, they're cultivating distinct styles for very distinct fan bases. Or consider TV hosts. Drew Ariano focuses on informative, structured shows, while Doc Nielsen thrives in immersive, gritty documentaries. Even athletes like Carlos Yulo and Hidalgo Diaz represent this perfectly. Carlos trains for gymnastics, focusing on agility and flow, right? While Hidalgo trained for weightlifting, focusing on explosive, raw power. Their end goals and the judges they perform for demand completely different physical languages. Well, poets do the exact same thing. They meticulously craft their point of view, length, and delivery to perfectly speak the language of the specific audience they are trying to reach. As we wrap things up today, take a brief moment to truly internalize what we've covered, realizing that authors deploy different strategies based on their ultimate goals, and discovering how poetry types physically vary based on their structure is absolutely critical. Understanding an author's purpose isn't just an exercise for reading in a classroom, it's the foundational secret for any aspiring writer looking to make a real impact. By understanding how the masters built their work, you gain the power to reverse engineer their success.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to chew on. Now that you have the decoder ring, which type of poetry, lyric, dramatic, or narrative, resonates most powerfully with you? Literature isn't just something you study, it's a toolkit you inherit. So, which tool are you going to pick up first? And more importantly, how will you use these building blocks to construct and share your own unique voice with the world? Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.